as we move out of the main part of the yard and we go down this narrow strip here, we're into an area that's a little bit less intensively managed, but is still full of lots of different food products and medicinal plants and flowers. And you can see here we have the laundry line hanging here as well. And down this narrow strip, the first thing that you'll notice are these fruit trees here. And these fruit trees are grown in a special way. We have 5 of them. There's 3 pears, an apple, and a cherry. And they are what's called an espalier. You have a look here, you can see that they're grown just in 2 dimensions along wires here. And these trees are now about 6 years old, and they're producing a tremendous amount of fruit, and they're doing it in a small amount of space. This is the brilliant thing about an espalier. You can grow fruit in an area that's about, in this space here, 3 or 4 feet across. And you just prune the branches so that you keep them in this particular pattern, which we are doing, which is a candelabra shape. This is a variety of apple called Norda, big, beautiful, delicious fruit. And below these fruit trees here on the espalier, we also have a variety of other species planted. We've got an understory of diverse plantings, including things like feverfew and valerian. We have St. John's wort, we have garden hyssop, and we also have some other vegetables like tomatoes, onions, lettuces, Swiss chard, a range of interplanted species that makes it harder for any potential pest to focus in on that particular plant. As we walk further down here, we also see on this side of the pathway a number of berry species. These are honeyberries, which produce fruit as early as first week in June. We've got the pathway lined with creeping thyme. There's strawberries down here. And then on the edge, as we move over to these raised beds here, which are now on my neighbor's property, but we have a great mutual relationship where I do the gardening on his land and we share the food, and we built these raised beds, and they are no-till beds. We don't dig them. We're just constantly adding organic matter like leaves and straw, compost, grass clippings, whatever we can get our hands on top. And if you have a look, you can see the lettuces that are planted here are interplanted with onions, and that is a strategy to, again, to minimize pest damage and to get the most yield possible out of a small space. We'll walk down a little further down the path here and see what else we've got going on. Well, on this side of the path, there are pear trees. These are hardy pears for Zone 3 in Edmonton, which is, we get lows down to -35, -40, and we can still grow pears here. A lot of people are surprised at that. On this side now we have, just coming into the beginning of fruiting, our raspberries. And again, they're growing up tall, making use of a lot of vertical space in this area. All of these crops here, as I said before, this is a little bit less intensively managed, so it's our Zone 2. And down a little further along here, we have a thick understory of strawberries. These are the domestic strawberries, and wow, we've had fantastic production this year. And they make such a thick, matted ground cover that we don't have to worry about using our time and energy to weed. It's a great way to have an edible ground cover. Raspberries are an incredibly productive plant and relatively low maintenance. Every second year we have to just thin them out a little bit, and every year we take out the plants, the canes that have produced, and it's the new growth that produces the following year. Nothing like fresh raspberries. Excellent. As we get to the border, the back of our property here, we have our composting and nutrient recycling stations, as I like to refer to them. And for our family, we have found that it's best to have 3 different compost piles going at once. We've got the pile that we're currently adding into, which is fresh kitchen wastes, everything from bones to plant material and small amounts of paper, supplemented with grass clippings and leaves and things like that. So that's the first pile, is the fresh one. The second pile, which is now outside of our gate here, is a pile that's been sitting for a little while and is starting to cure, and that we are turning from time to time and occasionally adding a little bit more nitrogen if we need to. And the third pile is this one over here, which is the pile that is either completely finished or just about finished, and we're maybe just turning it from time to time. And I'm amazed with the compost that we're able to produce in this, again, this one urban yard. Last year, I kind of totaled it up to a little bit over a cubic yard, which I thought was pretty good for the amount of space we're working with. And really the secret to any good compost is a diversity of green and brown materials, carbon and nitrogen-rich materials going into the pile, keeping it moist, but not too wet, and keeping it aerated, so turning it from time to time. And if it is done properly, when you stick your hand in the middle of the pile, it should be nice and warm and almost too hot to touch. And that is all of the microbial activity that is breaking down that plant debris and recombining it into this magical stuff called humus. And this is essential for any productive, intensive growing operation. You need to have lots of organic matter cycling, capturing all of those nutrients, putting them back into the soil, activating the soil, which is full, of course, of billions of microbes that really bring the soil alive and create the nutrient cycles and the fertility of the soil itself. So this is a key part of any permaculture system as well. And for those plants that are either really weedy species that we're pulling out that we don't want to put into the compost. However, if the compost is getting up to 50 or 60 degrees, which ours does, most of those seeds are going to be destroyed anyway. But just to be sure, we also have a barrel down here, and this barrel is a weed barrel. And not only do we put the weedy species that are going to seed into it, but we use other special plants, like this one over here, which is a beautiful plant. A plant called comfrey. And comfrey is not only a wonderful bee plant, it's a very good medicinal plant, but it's a plant that has a fantastically rich nutrient profile in it and is great as a compost plant or a green manure tea. And we soak them in the barrel with the weeds, along with a few other plants, including nettles from our yard, and we make a green tea that we then can water our pots and high-feeding annual vegetables like tomatoes or peppers. Fantastic system. And we've got this located right back here by the compost, and this is another really interesting permaculture principle called relative location, that we want to put things that have some kind of synergistic relationship with each other close together. So of course I want to have this comfrey fairly close to the compost because I'm using it there. And it's also a bit of an aggressive species, so we're putting it in an area where there's not a lot else will grow, and it can have its way there, but it won't spread and take over the whole yard. So fantastic biological resource that we can use in our garden system. I'll put this into the barrel now. These bags here, these are gifts from the neighbors. I find if I just walk down the streets here, I'm constantly finding people that are throwing out their organic matter in the form of grass clippings, and we don't really have much lawn in our yard at all, so we don't produce grass clippings, but this is a great nitrogen source for the compost pile. And then in the fall I pick up lots of bags of leaves, which is a great carbon source, and we'll have a number of bags of both of these around at all times to keep adding into our compost, keep creating an excellent nutrient balance in that compost pile, which is in turn going back into the soil.